Chapter 754. Yu Qianqiu stared at the wine cup in front of him in a daze. Huang Tian smiled faintly, thinking that Yu Qianqiu had been intimidated by his earth control technique. Little did he know that Yu Qianqiu's little heart was trembling when he heard the words, earth element. In a split second, a deep night sky star map became incomparably clear in his mind, and his heart surged in an instant. Although it's not the wine of the immortal world, it's still a fine wine of the mortal world. There's no poison in it, so try it. Huang Tian's words pulled Yu Qianqiu back from his daze. Yu Qianqiu's eyebrows moved slightly, and a trace of disdain flashed through his eyes. He picked up the wine cup without hesitation and drained it in one gulp. So what if there was poison in it? Yu Qianqiu didn't believe that it could be more poisonous than the soul-dispelling smoke. He wasn't even afraid of the soul-dispelling smoke, so why would he be afraid of a small cup of poisoned wine? Good wine. Yu Qianqiu smacked his lips and praised. Just as he put down the wine cup, he saw a hand reach out from the table and help him fill up the wine. Then, the hand disappeared from the table again. Yu Qianqiu resisted the urge to grab that hand and touch it. He looked around and asked curiously, the underground palace is all earthy yellow. Is it because of the soil? That's right. Huang Tian stroked his beard and smiled. When I was sent here to take care of affairs, I was tempted to build Yellow Soil City because I saw the large yellow soil plains here. Yu Qianqiu's heart stirred and he asked again, City Lord Huang is proficient in the earth element technique, but you're interested in this place. Is there some difference between yellow soil and normal soil? Huang Tian nodded and smiled. It's rare to see people care about this. That's right. For those who cultivated the earth manipulation technique, although they could control any kind of soil, for beginners, yellow soil was the easiest soil for them to learn and familiarize themselves with. For example, black soil and red soil were much weaker in terms of affinity. Also, yellow soil is more powerful for those who cultivate the earth control technique. The rarest thing is that the yellow soil here is very pure, with almost no other types of mixed soil. Coupled with the existence of such a large area, I was tempted to build a city. Yu Qianqiu had a thoughtful expression on his face. He vaguely remembered that he had read about the 5 elements in a book in his previous life. Metal, wood, water, fire, and earth each represented the 5 directions of west, east, north, south, and central, and each corresponded to the 5 colors of white, green, black, red, and yellow. He had already practiced the 3 magic arts of metal, water, and fire. It was precisely by relying on the understanding of the north, west, and south star maps that he comprehended at the same time that he simultaneously practiced these 3 magic arts. His body also produced 3 crystals of white, black, and red, which were astonishingly consistent with the records of the 5 elements in the books of his previous life. In that case, he was certain that he was still lacking the cyan wood element of the Eastern Star Chart and the yellow earth element of the Western Star Chart. Now, coupled with what Huang Tian had said about the yellow soil being beneficial for cultivating the earth control technique, didn't that mean that the best time for him to cultivate the earth formula had arrived, in this yellow soil plain? Thinking back to the night sky star map that had suddenly flashed in his mind, Yu Qianqiu couldn't help but become excited. The 5 star maps had already been deeply imprinted in his mind. There was no mistake. The star map that had involuntarily flashed in his mind was the Eastern Star Map, the position of the Earth Formula Star Map. His previous cultivation experience of the 3 5 elements magic arts told him that the 5 elements magic arts couldn't be forced. Every time he was attracted by the same element, the corresponding star map would automatically flash in his mind. At the same time, this also meant that the opportunity to cultivate the 5 elements magic arts had arrived. How could he not be excited? He deeply felt that even if he didn't find the purple fire in the Eastern Holy Land, it wouldn't be a wasted trip. If he hadn't deduced wrongly, once he successfully cultivated the earth formula, his cultivation would break through to the soul formation stage. Seeing that he hadn't come back to his senses after a while, Huang Tian asked suspiciously, "Could it be that you're also interested in cultivating the earth control technique?" He. That's not it. I just suspect that City Lord Huang's surname is Huang, so that's why I like the yellow soil. Yu Qianzhou casually said. This kind of nonsense was something he could easily come up with. What kind of logic was this? Huang Tian was stunned. He smiled and said, "It's true that my surname is Huang, but I still don't know little brother's surname and name. My name is Yu Qianzhou." After Yu Qianzhou returned to his senses, he asked, "I wonder what secret city Lord Huang wants to ask me by bringing me underground. It can't be that you only want to ask my name, right?" Huang Tian stared at Yu Qianzhou with a smile for a while before he slowly said, "Although I don't know why I can't see through your cultivation, judging from your reaction when I attacked earlier. If I'm not wrong, your cultivation shouldn't be at the soul formation stage. Am I right?" Huang Tian smiled and looked at Yu Qianzhou for a while before he slowly said, "Although I don't know why I can't see through your cultivation, but judging from your reaction when I attacked. If I'm not wrong, your cultivation shouldn't be at the soul formation stage. Am I right?" Huang Tian nodded. "I've guarded this place for many years, so I know a little more than others. That is, if your cultivation hasn't reached the soul formation late stage, even if the East Holy Land opens, you won't be able to enter through the entrance. If you force your way in, you'll definitely be crushed into dust by the power of the heaven and earth formation. Then I believe that a human cultivator like you has another way to enter the East Holy Land. Am I right?" Hearing this, Yu Qianzhou's heart shook. He didn't expect this to be a flaw. He narrowed his eyes and said, "So what if I'm right, so what if I'm wrong? Looks like I guessed right. You do have another way to enter the East Holy Land." He. I didn't expect to encounter it. Huang Tian finished the wine in front of him in one gulp. He put down the wine cup and took a deep breath. It was clear that he was trying his best to calm his agitated emotions. His fingers knocked on the table firmly and said, "This is the reason why I brought you underground. The secret I want to ask is for you to tell me how to leave this East Holy Land." Yu Qianzhou looked around and said with a cold smile, "If I don't tell you, are you going to imprison me here? You can understand it that way." Huang Tian said indifferently, "But this isn't the most important reason. I'm afraid that the walls have ears outside. How can such an important secret fall into the ears of others? Could it be that you want to keep this secret to yourself?" Yu Qianzhou put on a fake smile and said, "Don't you want to tell this secret to the immortal monarchs of the East and West palaces? Wouldn't that be a great merit?" "A great merit? Ha!" Huang Tian laughed loudly. No one knew what he was laughing about, but there was some bitterness hidden in his laughter. After laughing, he shook his head and said, "This isn't something you should be concerned about. You just need to tell me the secret." Yu Qianzhou said with an "Oh, why do I feel that once I tell the secret, it will be my death day?" "Because you don't want a second person to know this secret. Do you have a choice?" Huang Tian said indifferently. "I don't have a choice, but what I want to tell you is that there is actually no secret because I don't know how I got in here." Yu Qianzhou sneered and said, "Are you satisfied with this answer?" Huang Tian's expression turned cold. He stood up and said, "Yu Qianzhou, don't refuse a toast only to drink a forfeit." Yu Qianzhou also stood up slowly and said, "Either way, I will die if I don't tell you. If I don't tell you, I might live a little longer. You can do whatever you want." The black-clothed man said politely and walked side by side with Huang Tian to the brightly lit pavilion. If Yu Qianzhou saw this scene, he would know that it was not that Huang Tian was gentle and did not torture him, but that he had something to do and did not have time to tangle with him for the time being. In the dungeon west of the city, Yu Qianzhou appeared again. The moment immortal Lord Crocodile saw him, he immediately transmitted his voice. "Where did you go, kid?" Yu Qianqiu glanced at Boli and the others who were still tossing and turning on the pile of hay and transmitted his voice. "I've already killed that bastard Shang Huan, but who would have thought that I would run into Lost City Lord? Do you know who he is? It's that old man Huang Tian who gave us clothes for free. I almost suffered a great loss at his hands. You escaped from him." Immortal Lord Crocodile looked at Yu Qianqiu in shock. "Nonsense. If I didn't escape, would I still be here talking to you?" Yu Qianqiu said impatiently, "I came to tell you the truth. I have something to do and will be leaving for a period of time. I don't know when I'll be back, but it won't take too long. You guys can stay here for a while. This is for them to eat and drink. It should be enough until I return." A storage bag was thrown to Immortal Lord Crocodile. Chapter 755. What did he mean by uncertain return date? What did he mean by temporarily suffering here? Immortal Crocodile was a little dumbfounded. Before he could say anything, Yu Qianqiu had already disappeared. He quickly checked the contents of the storage bag, only to find that the contents were enough for Boli and the rest to eat for more than a month. Looking at the pitch-black prison, he suddenly felt his scalp go numb. This kid wouldn't let us stay here for a month, would he? The night breeze was cool, and there was no one on the Lost Plain. Occasionally, a few mice would jump around under the hazy moonlight. Yu Qianqiu's sudden appearance immediately frightened the group of mice, and they quickly scurried into the nearby holes. After carefully observing his surroundings, Yu Qianqiu's body leaped into the air lightly and landed in a ditch tens of meters behind him. When he had passed by this place on horseback, he had thrown a small silver ball here just in case. He did not expect it to really come in handy. However, the surrounding terrain was too open, and the ditch was only a few meters deep. He did not know how long he would be staying here. He could not possibly just sit here and cultivate, right? It was still barely passable at night, but if it was during the day, he would be easily discovered by passers-by. His eyes suddenly landed on a mouse that happened to pop its head out of a hole to take a look. His eyes immediately lit up, and he scurried back and forth in the ditch that was hundreds of meters long before he found a side wall that had caved in. With a flick of his sleeves, 6 black flame-flying swords flashed out and formed a drill that rapidly drilled into the ground, causing dust to rise. For safety reasons, he dug a tunnel that was more than 30 meters deep into the ground. Most of the crushed soil was sent into Utopia, and the rest was used to seal the entrance of the hole. At the end of the tunnel was a round nest with a diameter of 2 meters, which was enough for him to meditate and cultivate. Waha! Looking at his masterpiece, Yu Qianqiu could not help but dance and laugh wildly. He rubbed his hands together excitedly, sat down cross-legged, and slowly closed his eyes. Just as he silently memorized the middle-level star map in his mind, the vital energy in his body began to fluctuate uneasily. Yu Qianqiu was so excited that he was trembling slightly. If he remembered correctly, this was the same feeling he had when he was comprehending the gold art. It was as if there was a similar attribute around him that was attracting him. Because he was too excited, he actually couldn't get into the zone for a long time. He knew that there was a problem with his mentality. If he continued like this, he didn't know when he would be able to comprehend the cultivation method from the complicated star chart. This was a very complicated project, so he had to adjust his mentality. Chapter 756. No matter how the ruler treated the people, Baiwan was at least a country without foreign aggression. The people's lives were not too difficult. The reason for this was that ancestor Wen Lanfeng was behind it, so no one dared to attack Baiwan for the time being. Of course, ordinary people didn't know who Wen Lanfeng was. Only a few high-ranking officials of Baiwan nation knew who he was. However, because of the death of Baiwan's emperor, the whole country seemed to be in deep mourning, with white mourning everywhere. Although the emperor had passed away, the country still needed a successor. Thus, Crown Prince Wenhao naturally inherited the throne and became the new emperor of Baiwan. Outside the filial bedchamber, white banners covered the sky and the earth, and mournful wails could be heard everywhere. The coffin of the late emperor was in the center of the palace. The new emperor, Wenhao, and his mother knelt on 3 soft cushions below. The last one was empty, and no one knew who it was for. Behind him was a group of the late emperor's concubines, each of them wearing mourning clothes and weeping. Whether or not they really missed the late emperor, their grief was real. With the late emperor gone, they, who often competed with the empress for favor, might not have a good life in the future. The day of the new emperor's reckoning was not far away. The eyes of the former empress, now the empress dowager, were red and swollen. She glanced at the empty cushion to the left of the emperor from time to time, unable to hide the anger in her expression. In addition, she had knelt for so long that she was about to fall. Emperor Wenhao reacted quickly and supported her. He asked anxiously, "Mother, are you tired?" The eunuch of the Department of Rites did not dare to be negligent and hurried over to help. "The Empress Dowager is not feeling well. Your servant will help her to rest for a while." The Empress Dowager stubbornly pushed the 2 away and stared at the empty cushion on the left. She said angrily, "Where is Qing, On this mourning day for her father, does she still not change her playful nature?" The emperor immediately gave the eunuch a look. The eunuch understood that the new emperor was protecting his sister and did not want the Empress Dowager to hurt her health. He said with a sorrowful face, "Due to the death of the late emperor, the princess is too sad and hurt her body. It is inconvenient for her to kneel for a long time, so she is staying in the Green Scent Palace to observe mourning. She is not as playful as you think." When the Empress Dowager heard this, the anger on her face gradually disappeared and was replaced by a trace of worry. The emperor immediately said to the eunuch of the Department of Rites, "Go and see how the princess is. Don't let anything happen to her." "Yes." The eunuch hurriedly retreated in fear and trepidation. If Yan Zhuixing took her body and abandoned her, she couldn't imagine how she could live. Suddenly, Yan Zhuixing turned her over on the bed without warning. He dragged her white and tender thighs over, lay down suddenly, and forcibly entered her body. Then he crazily sprinted again. The huge force almost made Wenqing's skeleton fall apart. The tearing pain almost made her suffocate, but she still bit her lips and forced a smile to please him. After the raging wind and rain, Yan Zhuixing lay quietly on one side. Wenqing next to him seemed to be dead, and her body was motionless. After a long time, Yan Zhuixing stood quietly under the bed, and Wenqing's weak plea came from behind him, "Don't leave me." Yan Zhuixing slowly turned around, and Wenqing's lifeless eyes showed a pleading look. She stretched out her pale hand powerlessly, as if she was grasping a life-saving straw. She murmured and begged, "Don't leave me." Her outstretched hand suddenly fell down softly. Her eyes slowly closed, and her head tilted to one side powerlessly. The helpless eyes seemed to regard him as the only dependence in this life. The sincere, powerless, and absolute dependence made Yan Zhuixing, who had been hiding and running for his life, tremble all over. His blood was instantly ignited to boil. At this moment, he suddenly understood that not everyone in this world wanted to kill him or make use of him. There was such a woman who really loved him. She was naked and very frank and needed him to rely on her, without any selfish thoughts. The faint smell of blood filled the room. Yan Zhuixing's eyes that had turned from cold to soft suddenly shrank. His gaze fell on her lower body, and the dark red blood was soaking the bed. Yan Zhuixing's cold expression suddenly became terrified. He, who was used to seeing blood, couldn't help but tremble. He shouted helplessly, "Wenqing." After that, he seemed to realize that he had to save Wenqing. He took out the elixir from the storage bag on the ground and flashed to the bed. He quickly pointed at Wenqing's acupoints to stop the bleeding. After stopping the bleeding, he immediately helped Wenqing sit up. He put a spirit pill into her mouth and sat cross-legged behind her. He placed his palms on Wenqing's back and desperately injected demonic essence to help her recover. Looking at his anxious and somewhat crazy appearance, it was hard to believe that this person was really Yan Zhuixing. Wenqing, who was almost pulled away by the god of death, began to breathe again. Yan Zhuixing snatched her back from the hands of the god of death. At this time, Yan Zhuixing finally let out a sigh of relief. He gently picked up Wenqing and kicked away the blood-stained blanket. He pulled a clean blanket over Wenqing and placed her on the bed. He carefully stuffed a pillow under her head. Chapter 757. Slowly and meticulously, he put on his clothes and returned to the black-robed Yan Zhuixing with long hair draped over his shoulders. He slowly sat on the side of the bed and silently watched Hipster's face gradually recover its rosy color. He couldn't help but gently reach out to touch her face. Hipster seemed to sense it. Her eyelids moved slightly and she seemed to murmur in her sleep, "Don't leave me." Yan Zhuixing was frightened by this sound and withdrew his hand. He suddenly held his head with both hands and let out a hysterical silent cry. His expression was extremely painful. He didn't know what happened to him just now. Why did he desperately vent his unhappiness on a mortal woman and almost kill her? When Hipster's breathing completely stabilized, Yan Zhuixing sat on the side in a daze. His expression was dark and gloomy. No one knew what he was thinking. He stared at Hipster's sleeping face and murmured, "Hipster, I hope there will not be a day when you hate me." Suddenly, footsteps came from outside Wenqing Palace. Yan Zhuixing suddenly looked up and his face returned to indifference. Surrounded by a group of people, the new emperor, Wen Hao, came to Wenqing Palace under the guidance of the eunuch of the Department of Rites. There was no other reason. After hearing the eunuch's quiet report, his sister hid in Wenqing Palace and cried her heart out, but the guards didn't let him in to check. Wen Hao, who was deeply in love with his sister, found an excuse to get away from the Empress Dowager and hurried to see her, afraid that his sister would really cry and hurt her health. This time, the guards at the door didn't stop them. They held their sabers at their waist and half-knelt to let Wen Hao and the others into Wenqing Palace. The maids in the palace all knelt down. Wen Hao walked out of the room and suddenly turned back to shout at the people behind him, "Wait outside." However, the nascent soul cultivator Wen Bai, who was his personal bodyguard, still followed him to the door. It wasn't that the Wen family couldn't spare experts to protect the emperor, but because of Wen Lanfeng's reputation, no cultivator dared to break into the Baiwan Kingdom's palace to cause trouble. Therefore, the experts with good cultivation hid in the Wen family's sacred land to cultivate. Royal sister. Wen Hao knocked on the door several times, but there was no reply. Wen Hao hesitated for a moment, then pushed the door open and walked in. As soon as he turned into the bedroom, he saw a quilt and a woman's underwear on the ground. What made him even more shocked was that a man in a black robe with long hair was sitting in front of the bed, staring at him coldly. Wen Hao was shocked. "Who are you? Why are you here?" He refused to believe that this bottomless black hole could absorb all of the 100 million divine-grade spirit stones Immortal Crocodile had given him. If there was really no other choice, he could only teleport to the Yellow Earth Layer's prison and ask Immortal Crocodile, that rich guy, to continue supporting him. He believed that Immortal Crocodile wouldn't be stingy, otherwise, if he died, the old monster would be trapped alive in the Eastern Holy Lands. Thinking of this, Huang Xiaolong's mind was at ease, no longer worrying about not having enough spirit stones. By the time Yu Qianqiu counted close to 900 pieces of divine-grade spirit stones, the rate of spiritual energy absorption in his dantian suddenly slowed down. Yu Qianqiu's eyes lit up. Coincidentally, when he reached 900 pieces of divine-grade spirit stones, his dantian finally stopped breathing. Crash! The dried-up spirit stones fell to the ground. Yu Qianqiu was speechless looking at them. It had been a long time since he could remember clearly, and he didn't take it to heart at that time. However, He remembered clearly that he had used around 300 million high-grade spirit stones when he cultivated the gold arts on the Immortal Ascension platform. Now, he actually used 90 billion high-grade spirit stones, which was equivalent to a 300-fold increase. Based on this calculation, if he had a chance to cultivate the wood arts, would his spiritual energy increase by another 300-fold? 900 times 300 was equal to 270,000 divine-grade spirit stones. Yu Qianqiu sucked in a breath of cold air as he suddenly felt that his dantian was abnormally quiet. He quickly used his spiritual sense to check his dantian. Fortunately, the movements inside his dantian were no longer as loud as when he was absorbing spiritual energy. His divine sense was able to detect the movements inside his dantian. At this time, the amount of true essence inside his dantian was as thin as mist. Although the little boy's nascent soul was still the same size, it had turned into a middle-aged man, looking exactly like Yu Qianqiu. Sitting cross-legged with his eyes closed, the four-colored crystal bead that had stopped spinning started to spin again, pulling Yu Qianqiu's dantian along with it. The spinning speed became faster and faster, dazzling the eyes of those watching. In the end, the things inside his dantian reminded Yu Qianqiu of a picture of Saturn from his past life's textbooks. The nascent soul that looked like him was spinning into a round ball, resembling Saturn itself, and the four crystal beads resembled the rings of Saturn's moons. Moreover, they were multicolored rings, extremely beautiful. All of a sudden, a loud boom resounded in his dantian, akin to the Big Bang. The rings of light around the four crystal beads suddenly expanded, and the perfectly round nascent soul in the middle exploded into a cloud of dust, filling his dantian in an instant. The dust from the explosion rushed out of his dantian, entering every meridian in Yu Qianqiu's body. In that split second, Yu Qianqiu finally experienced what it meant to be sweet after suffering, feeling so comfortable that he let out a moan. He felt that his whole body was full of explosive energy, a kind of powerful energy that he had never experienced before, so powerful that it felt like it was going to rush out of his body. His bones and veins were stretching and contracting with a creaking sound. It was a pleasant feeling of reaching the sky in a single bound. He opened his eyes abruptly, and they flickered with a bright light. He was filled with unprecedented confidence. Yu Qianqiu took a deep breath and closed his eyes again to check the situation inside his dantian. With just one glance, he was immediately stunned. He saw that the four-colored crystal beads were spinning at a moderate speed, and two nascent souls that looked like him appeared in it. They sat back to back with their eyes closed, inhaling and exhaling the aura inside his dantian to refine it. Yu Qianqiu immediately remembered what Nongzhu had told him about the 3 souls and 7 spirits. The nascent soul was the life soul of the 3 souls and 7 spirits. When another soul was born from the life soul, it would be the heavenly soul, which was the sign that one's cultivation had entered the divinization stage. Chapter 758. Could it be that I've really reached the soul formation stage? Yu Qianqiu asked himself. He was so excited that he was trembling. Although the powerful energy in his body told him that he was right, he still felt like he was dreaming and couldn't believe that it was real. He took a deep breath and stood up slowly. The bones in his body cracked and he looked up at the top of his head. Suddenly, a huge imposing aura burst out from his body. His whole body was like an arrow that had left the bow, directly shooting upwards. Boom! A deafening sound echoed. There were few people on the vast plain. It was unknown how many years it had been like this. The yellow earth that had been roasted by the scorching sun suddenly trembled. Then, a pitch-black hole appeared on the flat ground with a bang sound. A silhouette darted out from the smoke and dust that had burst out, and stood still in the air for a moment. Yu Qianqiu floated in the air quietly. He clenched his fists in excitement. It didn't take much effort for him to break through the thick yellow earth with his body. He was sure that he had reached the soul formation initial stage. He didn't expect that he would achieve what he had been pursuing for so many years. He didn't expect that he would reach the soul formation stage one day. He thought back to when he first entered Kwangtsung. He didn't expect that he would become one of the soul formation experts from today onwards. He looked around and felt a sense of pride. He had been improving rapidly. He believed that one day, he would be like his master, Bai Changchun, and become a real torture master of the demon region. Roar! Yu Qianzhou floated in the air and opened his arms. He looked up to the sky and let out a long howl. His passionate howl echoed across the vast yellow earth plain. The long howl stopped. He was in high spirits. His gaze was like an owl as he stared at the hole that he had created on the yellow soil plain. He waved his palm to cover the hole and shouted, "Rise!" The yellow earth plain below surged like waves and piled up in the middle. It got taller and taller. In a short while, a cone-shaped mountain rose from the ground. The mountain rose to a height of 100 meters and supported Yu Qianzhou. Yu Qianzhou stood quietly at the peak of the 100-meter-high mountain and gazed into the distance. There were many experts that he could look up to in that distant place. In that distant place, his master, Bai Changchun, was constantly surpassing himself and improving his cultivation. What about him? He was only at the soul formation initial stage. Compared to them, he was still far from them. There was nothing to be happy about. He still had a long way to go. However, Yu Qianzhou's eyes flashed. He suddenly said to the world, "In 100 years, who will rise and fall?" Rise! He could only wait for an opportunity to use other people's treasures to experiment. So far, the gold spell had not been used in actual combat. It was only used to scare people. Because he found that the gold spell was more suitable for people with high cultivation in close combat. It was not suitable for long-range attacks. In close combat, it could unexpectedly destroy the opponent's magic weapon and then kill them. If it was used with other spells, the auxiliary power would be quite amazing. Its practical significance was not weaker than any other spells. Now that his cultivation had broken through to the soul formation stage in one fell swoop, the range of his chi movement was wider. Whether it was using the flying sword, the absorbing star's great technique, or the gold spell, he could exert greater power. Especially the absorbing star's great technique. With the current cultivation of the soul formation stage, once it was used on a large scale, it was simply an unparalleled killing spell. Even he felt a little scared when he thought about it. If such a spell fell into the hands of people with bad intentions, it would be a big disaster. Of course, there were times when the absorbing star's great technique failed. It was in the battle with Yan Zhuixing in Lingfang Valley. Yu Qianzhou still couldn't understand why the absorbing star's great technique couldn't kill Yan Zhuixing. He clearly couldn't resist it. He had already been sucked dry, but he could still come back to life. It was simply incredible. Could it be because they all had the word Xing in their names? Like repels like. Bullshit. The power of these three spells had already made Yu Qianzhou confident. The only thing he didn't know was how to properly use the earth spell that he had just successfully cultivated. If it was only used to pile up a mountain of earth and gather an earth sword, it would be too boring. Even if it was an earth-controlling technique like Huang Tian, Yu Qianzhou didn't care anymore. For the earth spell, it was just child's play. After thinking about it, Yu Qianzhou still couldn't figure out how to use it to display the power that the earth spell should have. The ability of the first three spells was clear for all to see. He didn't believe that the earth spell was so useless. If only Master Bai Changchun was here. Perhaps with his extraordinary perception, he could give some pointers. Thinking back, wasn't the absorbing star's great technique taught by Bai Changchun? Otherwise, Yu Qianzhou wouldn't have thought that the water spell could be used in this way and display such power. After thinking for a long time, he still couldn't figure out anything. He realized that thinking like this wasn't a solution. He could only wait for himself to slowly understand. Looking around, he was suddenly slightly shocked. He didn't know how long he had been here. Child's play. Yu Qianqiu snorted disdainfully. He waved his sleeves, and the hole quickly healed. He walked back to the table, looked at the mud ball on the table, and waved his hand, turning it into dust. Yu Feng nodded slightly and transmitted his voice with mixed feelings. In that battle, immortal monarch Night Owl was no match for him. The last time that person barged into the immortal city, he was severely injured by immortal monarch Night Owl's treasure, the 1,000 feather wings. This time, immortal monarch Night Owl's treasure, the 1,000 feather wings, was completely destroyed by that person, and an immortal monarch Night Owl was injured quite badly. Huang Tian was immediately shocked. As someone from the immortal world, of course he knew about immortal monarch Night Owl's treasure, the 1,000 feather wings. It was a top-grade treasure that could attack and defend in the immortal world. What shocked him the most was that immortal monarch Night Owl was injured. Yu Feng continued to transmit his voice with mixed feelings. At this critical moment, Western Palace Jiwu immortal monarch, who rarely shows herself, appeared. The two immortal monarchs joined forces to fight that person. That battle could be said to be earth-shattering. Ever since the battle against the 1,000 Swords Demon Monarch, it has been many years since there was a huge battle. Almost half of the huge immortal city is in ruins. Even if an ordinary person wanted to help, they wouldn't be able to. Two immortal monarchs joined forces and they let him escape. Huang Tian's face was full of disbelief. Yu Feng shook his head slightly and said, he did escape, but with two immortal monarchs working together, it's not that easy. In addition, immortal monarch Night Owl was fighting with all his might. That person ran with injuries. Otherwise, with that person's ruthlessness, he wouldn't have retreated unless he had no other choice. Huang Tian narrowed his eyes and said, that's strange. Since he was no match for two immortal monarchs working together, why didn't they chase him? The entire continent is like a cage, and he was seriously injured. Where could he run to? Immortal monarch Night Owl doesn't seem like someone who nurtures a tiger. Hee hee. You won't believe me even if I tell you. Yu Feng's eyes were burning with passion as he lowered his voice and said, that person could actually enter and exit the heaven and earth formation at will. The two immortal monarchs were determined not to let him go, and they chased him all the way to the sky. Who knew that they would be stopped by the heaven and earth formation, and that person could directly pass through it, leaving them in the dust. That smell is very similar to the 1,000 Swords Demon Monarch back then. What? Huang Tian was dumbfounded. He can enter and exit the heaven and earth formation at will. How is that possible? He immediately thought of Yu Qianqiu who was still trapped underground, and he already suspected if there was any connection between the two. Yu Feng sneered and said, actually, in terms of cultivation, I'm afraid that person is no match for any immortal monarch. However, not only is his cultivation high, but he also seems to be able to borrow the power of heaven and earth. After he escaped from the heaven and earth great array, everyone understood that since the heaven and earth great array couldn't restrain him, he could fight to his heart's content and didn't have to worry about the array taking away half of his immortal essence. Think about it, immortal monarch Night Owl consumes 20% of his celestial core power to unleash 10% of his power, but he can unleash 100% of his power with 100% of his power. How can immortal monarch Night Owl not be at a disadvantage when they fight? Hearing this, Huang Tian nodded vaguely. It seemed like he agreed, but in fact, he didn't agree. How could accounts be calculated like this? Although it was a little disadvantageous and would affect the endurance of the fight, when it came to fighting, one could still unleash as much power as one had. It was just that the consumption of celestial core power would be doubled. Moreover, didn't the two immortal monarchs join forces in the end? Although he thought so, Yu Feng seemed to be protecting the immortal monarch's face, so he couldn't say too much. After a moment of silence, he asked, "Why did this person barge into the celestial city? Is there something in the celestial city that he wants?" Hearing this, Yufeng didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He said, "What does he want? He doesn't want anything. That person is a complete madman." The first time he came to the celestial city, he called out 2 immortal monarchs to fight him. Of course, the people below wouldn't be polite and immediately attacked. The second time he came again. With the previous lesson, everyone could see that this person wasn't ordinary. Naturally, they weren't in a hurry to attack. Because they couldn't keep fighting with him for no reason. They had to know the reason for the fight. So this time, someone asked him why he came to challenge the immortal monarchs and what his intentions were. Guess what his answer was? Huang Tian was stunned and asked, "How did he answer?" That madman said, he came to fight, to lose, until he met an opponent that he couldn't surpass and died in battle. This was his lifelong wish, and he had no other wish. Yufeng didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He said, "Do you think this person is a madman?" After so long, he didn't have any intentions. He just came to the celestial city to fight the immortal monarchs. Say, everyone has been idle for so many years. Don't those people who were beaten to death for no reason feel wronged? Huang Tian was speechless. For someone like this who was purely seeking death for the sake of fighting, it wasn't wrong to say that he was a madman. Huang Tian was stunned and asked weakly, "This time, he escaped again. Will he come a third time?" "Come." Yufeng said unhappily. Before he escaped, he laughed loudly and said that it was satisfying, saying that this trip was not in vain. He even said to the 2 immortal monarchs that he would come again after he recovered. When the 2 immortal monarchs heard that he was going to come again, they felt a headache coming. For a madman like this who became stronger and stronger the more he fought, who was not afraid of fighting, who could bear to fight with him. Immortal monarch Night Owl has already gone to the underground world to contact the 2 netherworld generals. Chapter 760. Contact the 2 netherworld generals? Huang Tian was surprised. The 2 netherworld generals have not come out for a long time, and there has always been a barrier between them and the people of the immortal world. Can the immortal lord pull them out? Maybe not usually. Yufeng's eyes were burning. But don't forget, that madman can enter and exit the heaven-earth formation at will. As long as we capture that madman, we can unravel the secret of entering and exiting the formation. Do you think the 2 netherworld generals can resist such a huge temptation? If that madman dares to come again, the 2 immortal lords and the 2 netherworld generals can work together and subdue him. That's true. Huang Tian, who was nodding slightly, suddenly raised his eyebrows. His eyes flickered, and he smiled. "Brother Yufeng, please wait a moment. I just remembered something. I'll be back soon." Yufeng raised his hand and smiled. "City Lord Huang is too polite. Please go ahead." Huang Tian cupped his hands and disappeared from the room in the tower. After returning to the City Lord Manor, Huang Tian casually walked towards a secluded corner of the garden. As he walked, his entire body suddenly sank into the ground. Inside the underground palace, Yu Qianqiu, who was sitting in front of a table with his eyes closed, suddenly opened his eyes. He stared at the walls of the underground palace in front of him. There was a ripple, and Huang Tian strolled out, giving off the feeling of an immortal passing through walls. "What? You finally thought it through." Huang Tian walked over with a smile, revealing an expression that said, "At least you're sensible." Yu Qianqiu sized him up, then leaned back on the chair and supported his chin with his hand. He said in a low voice, "I've thought it through. I can't leave this continent sealed by the heaven-earth formation alone, so I need your help. In other words, I need to work with you." Huang Tian's smile froze, and he frowned. Why don't I understand what you mean? It's very simple. Yu Qianqiu stood up and sighed. Believe it or not, I'll tell you the truth. I've been researching the mysteries of the heaven and earth, heaven earth, heaven earth, heaven earth formation. I spent a lot of time and finally found a way to come in. However, if I want to leave, I'll need to spend more time researching. However, I'm very confident in my attainments in formations. Since I can come in, I can definitely get out. As long as we find the eye of the formation, getting out will be a piece of cake. Do you think I'll believe your nonsense? Huang Tian sneered and said, Actually, it's very simple for me to let you go. There's no need to spout nonsense. You just need to tell me how to leave. I promise I won't kill you. He had already thought it through. As long as he could get his hands on the method to leave, he could promise not to kill him. However, not killing him didn't mean that he couldn't cripple him. Damn it! Trying to play this game with me. Yu Qianqiu raised an eyebrow, his face full of mockery as he said, City Lord Huang, I think you're mistaken about one thing. If I really wanted to leave this place, I don't need your permission to let me go. Your mere underground palace can't trap me. The reason why I haven't left until today is that I've used these few days to think things through, and I feel that cooperating with you is the best choice. Oh. Huang Tian revealed a face full of mockery and said, Then I'd like to see how you can leave this place if I don't let you go. If you really have the ability to leave this underground palace, I'll agree to cooperate with you. He didn't believe that Yu Qianqiu would obediently stay here if he could leave this place. Hee. It seems that if I don't show some sincerity, City Lord Huang won't believe me at all. Yu Qianqiu shook his head and sighed, I've always been a low-profile person and don't like to be ostentatious, but, fine. Today, I'll show off a little. It'll also let City Lord Huang know my sincerity in cooperating with you. Under Huang Tian's disdainful gaze, this guy looked around and stretched out a hand, pointing at the place Huang Tian had just come out from. The earthen wall on the opposite side melted away like snow, revealing a pitch-black hole that was 2 meters wide and wide enough for a person to pass through. City Lord Huang, do you believe me now? Yu Qianqiu asked with a deadpan expression. Huang Tian was completely dumbfounded. In the end, Yu Qianqiu shook his head and muttered to himself, not saying anything, that means you don't believe me. Fine, he stretched out his hand again, and with 2 fingers, he pointed to the east, then to the west, then to the left, then to the right. In short, he randomly pointed to the front, back, left, right, up, down, down, and down. In the blink of an eye, the underground palace was filled with holes, and the underground palace couldn't be considered an underground palace anymore. It was completely an underground hub that connected in all directions. After finishing his work, Yu Qianqiu put his hands behind his back and asked with a face full of mockery, City Lord Huang, which hole do you think I should leave from? Huang Tian was flabbergasted. After a while, he asked, So you also know how to control Earth, hee. I've always been a low-profile person. There's no need to mention this. Yu Qianqiu waved his hand apologetically, as if it was just a small trick that wasn't worth mentioning. Huang Tian was speechless. Then, he asked with a complicated expression, How do you want to cooperate? He suddenly felt like he was fooling himself. After seeing Yu Qianqiu's methods, he completely believed in Yu Qianqiu's sincerity. Otherwise, Yu Qianqiu could really leave at any time. There was no need to wait for him. He comforted him, Don't worry, I also want to leave this place as soon as possible. Don't worry. As long as the target is locked onto the heaven and earth universe formation, there will definitely be more than one person who has seen it. I'll find a way to find out about the purple flames as soon as possible. Yu Qianqiu calmed down a little and began to ponder whether he should think of a way to leak the news that he could leave the heaven and earth Great Qingku formation. Old Huang's ability seemed to be limited. He should be able to find the purple flames faster with the help of the immortal monarchs of the eastern and western palaces. Huang Tian's heart trembled slightly when he saw Yu Qianzhou's gaze drifting about. He narrowed his eyes and said in a deep voice, Yu Qianzhou, since you and I have agreed to cooperate, I hope no one else knows about this. His tone concealed a hint of threat. Yu Qianzhou raised his eyebrows and said, Don't worry about this, I have quite a reputation outside and am doing very well. I don't want all the masters here to go out and join in the fun. The world can't accommodate so many great gods. City Lord Huang, on the other hand, you have to be careful when you find the purple flames. I know what I'm doing, you don't have to worry about it. Huang Tian paused and suddenly said, Speaking of the outside, I thought of something. I don't know if you know this person. This person can actually ignore the heaven and earth Qian Kuan formation. He immediately repeated what Yu Feng had said. Yu Qianzhou was speechless. He didn't need to guess to know that it must be that amazing master of his. Who else could it be other than him? This old man was as monstrous as ever. The more he played, the bigger he got. He hoped that he didn't kill himself. But then again, worrying for him was unnecessary. The old man insisted on walking the path of terror, and no one could stop him. After thinking about it, he shook his head and said, I've never heard of such an expert in the world. Huang Tian nodded and said, I also feel that it's impossible for there to be such an expert in the world. Maybe he's a rising star in the celestial world. Yu Qianzhou waved his hand and said, Let's not talk about him. Let's talk about me first. My native friends are still in prison. Why don't you find a reason to release them and give us a free identity? Huang Tian nodded to indicate that he would arrange it. Yu Qianzhou looked around and said, You should keep this underground palace. If there's anything, we'll meet here. Let's just say it like this. I'll go to prison first. Quickly release us. I'm leaving. After saying that, he dashed into the mud wall and disappeared. Huang Tian's face twitched. This underground palace really couldn't trap him. Chapter 761. In the dungeon, as soon as Yu Qianzhou appeared, Immortal Lord Crocodile immediately transmitted his voice to him. Did you find Huang Tian? Yu Qianzhou did not disturb the others. He quietly lay down beside him and replied with a voice transmission, It's done. We will be able to leave in no time. You killed his men. He didn't make things difficult for you. Immortal Lord Crocodile asked curiously. You're worrying too much. There's nothing I can't handle. This is what it means to be capable. Yu Qianzhou lay down on a pile of straw and crossed his legs. The two of them chatted casually. Sure enough, after waiting for a while, the sound of the metal door opening came from outside. The footsteps were getting closer and closer. After the door of the cell was opened, under the dim light, someone shouted at the door, All of you, come out. Boli and the others hurriedly stood up and walked out. The guard scolded them a few times and led them outside. Once out of the dungeon, Boli and the others felt that the sunlight was blinding because they had stayed in the dark for too long. In the courtyard outside the dungeon stood a few soldiers in bright armor. They were obviously of a higher grade than the guards here. A man with a dignified aura slowly sized them up. After that, he asked in a deep voice, Who is Yu Qianzhou? I am. Yu Qianzhou, who was the smallest among them, stood out. The man looked at him meaningfully and said in a relaxed tone, You can go out, but you have been stripped of your right to participate in the fence gathering. Without permission, you cannot leave Lost City. Boli and the others looked at each other and kept quiet. They were obviously a little afraid. To them, the city guards were people they had to look up to. Yu Qianzhou frowned. This must be Huang Tian's order. He did not know what the old man meant. Was there any meaning in doing this? Immortal Lord Crocodile said impatiently, Can we go now? With his pride, if it was not to cooperate with Yu Qianqiu, he would not stay in a place like this to be scolded. The man didn't get angry and nodded without changing his expression. Immortal Crocodile was the first to leave. Yu Qianqiu smiled and waved at Boli and the rest. Let's go, let's go. It's fine now. He guessed that these guys must have been living in fear for the past few days. The man with the dignified aura silently watched them leave, and his expression seemed to be deep in thought. The sacred palace of Baiwan country, which was hidden in the deep mountains and beautiful rivers, was pure white and smooth like jade. Under the illumination of the sun, it radiated a warm light. It was symmetrical with the surrounding mountain scenery, like a piece of jade embedded in the mountain, with the mountains on one side and the water on the other. It was holy and pure. The air outside was fresh and green, with birds chirping and flowers blooming everywhere. In front of the white jade railings of the temple stood Wen Lanfeng in a plain gray robe. The color of his robe reflected his mood. The pleasant scenery could not dispel the faint melancholy in his eyes. The plain gray robe, the slender figure, and the melancholy eyes, stood there quietly, looking extremely lonely. He had been standing here for a long time, and no one dared to disturb him. The peerless beauty of Lingfang Valley still lingered in his dreams. His infatuation had not wavered for countless years. On the flowering path outside, a man calmly walked over and bowed to the dazed Wen Lanfeng. Elder ancestor. Wen Lanfeng slowly came back to his senses and smiled faintly. It's Wen Rui. What's the matter? What's the matter? Wen Rui smiled and reported. It's like this. There's someone outside who wants to see you. I can't chase him away, so I'm here to ask for your permission. Oh. Wen Lanfeng frowned slightly. Who wants to see me? Wen Rui muttered. I don't know if it's true or not. He claims to be Yan Juixing, but I don't think so. Yan Juixing. Wen Lanfeng's eyes instantly turned sharp. He asked in a low voice, where is he? Yan Juixing had taken away Lu Yanqing's disciple, Xan Lao San, which worried Lu Yanqing. How could he not care about it? He's waiting by the heart-cleansing lake. Before Wen Rui finished his words, Wen Lanfeng had already turned into a shadow and flew away. Wen Rui immediately followed him. In the depths of the jungle, the heart-cleansing lake was as calm as a mirror, reflecting the blue sky and white clouds. From time to time, various kinds of birds flew by. There were pavilions built by the lake, which were the residences for receiving guests. Mist curled up from the lake, setting off the scenery here like a fairyland on earth. A black-robed man stood by the lake. His silky black hair was draped over his shoulders, covering half of his face. He was expressionless as he watched the fish swimming leisurely in the lake. No one knew what he was thinking. Two figures landed behind him, one in front and one behind. He continued to stare at the lake silently. Wen Lanfeng was slightly startled when he saw the black-robed man. He had seen Yan Juixing before. At that time, Yan Juixing's cultivation was only at the early stage of crossing calamity. But this man's cultivation was clearly at the early stage of soul formation. Wen Lanfeng stared at the back of the black-robed man and said in a low voice, Who are you? Why did you pretend to be Yan Juixing and trick me to come out to meet you? Do you think I have a good temper? How would I dare to lie to you, Senior Wen? I'm afraid you're forgetful. The unmoving black-robed man finally turned around slowly. His long black hair fluttered even though there was no wind. It was Yan Juixing's true appearance. You. Wen Lanfeng was shocked. He had seen Yan Juixing before. I believe Senior Wen must know where Yu Qianqiu is. Yan Juixing's black robe and long hair suddenly fluttered without any wind. He asked word by word, I want to know where Yu Qianqiu is. Wen Lanfeng was slightly stunned. It was obvious that Yan Juixing wanted to find Yu Qianqiu for revenge. With Yan Zhuixing's current cultivation, he was afraid that Yu Qianqiu would have a hard time. Moreover, it was impossible for him to tell Yan Zhuixing that Yu Qianqiu was no Yud. He paused and said, "Hand over third Xian and I can let you go today." Yan Zhuixing's eyes lit up and he sneered, "It seems that Senior One knows where Yu Qianqiu is. You just don't want to say it. If that's the case, I won't force you. I believe I can find other people who know. Goodbye." Just when he was about to turn around, he heard Wen Lanfeng shout, "Stop. Do you think you can leave today?" "Oh." Yan Zhuixing stopped and shook his head, "That's not necessarily true. You don't have the ability, but you have the guts. You don't know the immensity of heaven and earth. Today, I will let you know what is certain." Just when Wen Lanfeng was about to make a move, he suddenly felt a slight movement behind him. He thought that Wen Rui was going to attack on his behalf. Unexpectedly, he felt a chill in his chest. An ice-cold sword had already pierced through his chest. Wen Lanfeng stretched out 2 fingers at lightning speed to clamp the sword's edge to prevent it from moving and causing him more serious injuries. He suddenly looked back and saw that the person who sneak attacked him was none other than Wen Rui, who was standing behind him. He was desperately urging the sword in his hand to kill him. At this moment, Wen Lanfeng's mood was no less than being struck by lightning. He only felt cold all over and roared, "Wen Rui, you bastard!" The difference in their cultivation was too big. Wen Lanfeng's impressive cultivation was not child's play. When Wen Rui saw that his sword was caught between Wen Lanfeng's 2 fingers and he was unable to move it even after exerting all his cultivation, he was immediately shocked. He immediately abandoned his sword and flashed over, swinging his palm towards the top of Wen Lanfeng's head. Looking at this move, it was obvious that he wanted to kill Wen Lanfeng in one blow. Black evil spirit instantly gushed out from his body and lingered around him. Yan Zhuixing, with his long hair fluttering in the wind, slowly raised his head. His cold gaze shifted from his own body to Wen Lanfeng. He said indifferently, "Senior Wen is indeed worthy of your reputation." This was not a compliment. Yan Zhuixing thought that Wen Rui's sneak attack first and he would succeed with his demonic skills. But who knew that Wen Lanfeng was as immovable as a mountain? With just a raise of his hand, he immediately forced the 2 into an embarrassing situation. One of them was seriously injured. Wen Rui was still struggling in the ruins of the wooden building that he had crashed into. However, he seemed to be injured too badly. He shook his dizzy head and could not stand up for a long time. Wen Lanfeng stared at him with a sorrowful expression on his face. He allowed the blood to flow from his chest and back. The blood that flowed out formed strange patterns on his gray robe, giving the illusion that his robe had been torn apart. No matter how much blood flowed, it could not drain the sorrow in his heart. He really could not think of any way that he had wronged Wen Rui. Wen Lanfeng pointed a finger at his chest and channeled his strength through his meridians, immediately stopping the bleeding on his chest and back. His long but somewhat bleak body suddenly turned around and stared at Yan Zhuixing angrily. "Ignorant junior, don't even think of leaving today. Leave your life here." Yan Zhuixing was waiting for him to turn around and look at him. He immediately grasped the opportunity and shouted in a deep voice, "Look at my demon eye." His eyes suddenly glowed with a demonic red light and directly looked at Wen Lanfeng's stare. Wen Lanfeng's expression slightly stiffened. But in the blink of an eye, his eyes suddenly glowed and he shouted angrily, "Crooked Wei, how dare you act wildly in front of me? Today, I must eliminate you, you scourge." His loud and clear voice was deafening, surging layer by layer. Yan Zhuixing showed a pained expression. The demonic red light in his eyes suddenly disappeared. With a flick of his long hair, he spat out a mouthful of blood. Wen Lanfeng's cultivation was profound and his primordial spirit was as strong as steel. It was not someone that Yan Zhuixing could cross levels to capture. As a result, he suffered a backlash and injured himself. In fact, The demonic book had long warned that when facing an opponent with a certain level of cultivation, one should not use demon eye ecstasy lightly. Otherwise, one could easily suffer a backlash. Within a certain level of cultivation, it could be used to cross levels because the primordial spirits in this level were relatively light and easy to capture. After this level, as the opponent's primordial spirit had stabilized, it could at most be used on people of the same level. The higher the level, the more stable the primordial spirit was, and the harder it was to control. In the end, one could only control people with a lower level of cultivation. If one encountered a cultivator with attainments in the primordial spirit, one had to be extra careful even if their cultivation was lower. Otherwise, one might be controlled by the other party. This was the fatal weakness of demon eye ecstasy. But then again, if one could control it regardless of the level of cultivation, the world would have long been the world of demonic cultivators. It was not that Yan Juixing did not know this, but because of the improvement of his cultivation and the fact that he had injured Bing Qingzi with a punch, he was indeed a little overconfident. As a result, he suffered a loss in the hands of Wen Lanfeng. As the saying goes, there must be a gain for every loss. After suffering a loss, he would remember the lesson. At this moment, a silver light suddenly flashed out from the storage bag on Wen Lanfeng's waist. The sword moved along with his finger. Wen Lanfeng waved his arm and pointed. The giant silver sword did not stop at all. With the momentum of a thunderbolt, it stirred up layers of almost substantial air waves and burst out. In this blow, Wen Lanfeng did not hold back any strength. He wanted to kill Yan Juixing. The monstrous momentum rushed like a cannon. The silver light in the middle shocked Yan Juixing, who was shaken. He immediately teleported to avoid it without thinking. However, just when he appeared hundreds of meters away, he could immediately hear the roar that broke through the air. Yan Juixing slightly tilted his head and was immediately scared out of his wits. The giant silver sword almost followed him at the same time. It was frighteningly fast, and he immediately teleported to avoid it, when Lanfeng stood by the lake in a blood-stained grey robe. His eyes followed Yan Juixing, who was dodging. He was completely determined to kill Yan Juixing. How could he easily escape? The lake water beside the heart-cleansing lake suddenly rippled and was pushed away layer by layer. Each wave was higher than the previous one. Just when Wen Lanfeng's momentum soared and he wanted to fly to the sky to deal with Yan Juixing, there was a flapping sound in the ruins of the wooden building behind him. Wen Lanfeng suddenly turned back. He saw Wen Rui's eyes were about to crack. He coughed out mouthfuls of blood and seemed to be madly rushing over. Bastard! Wen Lanfeng shouted angrily. He was immediately furious. He raised his palm with surging momentum wrapped in murderous intent. With Wen Rui's current weak body, he would probably immediately lose his life if he were to use this palm. However, when Wen Lanfeng's eyes met Wen Rui's unprecedented tyrannical eyes, he immediately remembered the moment when Yan Juixing wanted to control him with the magic eye. He instantly understood why Wen Rui's sneak attacked him. He dodged sideways to avoid Wen Rui, who was knocked down, and pointed two fingers on Wen Rui's back. The finger's strength easily penetrated Wen Rui's meridians, and Wen Rui immediately collapsed to the ground. At this moment, there was a sharp whistling sound in the air. Wen Lanfeng suddenly looked over and saw a flowing light get rid of the giant silver sword at an incredible speed. Want to run? Wen Lanfeng snorted coldly. He had disappeared. He teleported 3 times in the air and instantly caught up with Yan Juixing. He waved his fist and directly punched, "Leave your life here." The strong wind blew wildly in the air with astonishing momentum. Yan Juixing looked back and was immediately scared out of his wits. Wen Lanfeng had already swung his fist in front of him with a face full of anger. At this time, Yan Juixing had no choice but to fight. He used all his cultivation and shouted, "Magic fist!" Boom! There was a loud sound in the air, and the airwave collapsed. Yan Zhuixing made a puff sound and spat out another mouthful of blood. He was directly thrown far away by the powerful impact. However, he could not care about anything at this time. The only priority was to escape. With the help of the powerful impact, he took advantage of the magic light glimpse movement technique to the extreme and fled into the sky like a flowing light. He looked back from time to time, afraid that when Lanfeng would catch up again, when Lanfeng stopped in the air and watched Yan Zhuixing escape. His eyes were filled with disbelief. The penetrating and explosive force contained in Yan Zhuixing's punch was so strong that when Lanfeng could not believe that the punch was made by Yan Zhuixing. In fact, at this time, it was not that he did not want to chase Yan Zhuixing again, but the true vitality in his body was extremely chaotic. He had a faint feeling that he could not condense it. It seemed that the power of Yan Zhuixing's punch was still reverberating in his body. At this time, the penetrating wound on his chest and back was gurgling blood again. Unfortunately, Yan Zhuixing, who was busy running for his life, did not see this scene. Otherwise, he should be able to more or less see that when Lanfeng had almost lost the ability to fight at this time. If he could take the opportunity while he had not recovered, he would definitely be able to avenge the hatred of Lingfang Valley. After a long time, when Lanfeng, who stopped in the air, finally recovered. He pointed a finger at his chest and the bleeding on his chest and back was stopped again. At this time, when Lanfeng's face was a little pale, which was related to the excessive blood loss. However, with his cultivation, it was not fatal. Staring at the direction where Yan Zhuixing disappeared, when Lanfeng shook his head slightly and sighed. He knew that he had missed the opportunity and it was useless to chase. As soon as he turned around, he saw a group of Wen family disciples flying over. These disciples who were cultivating in seclusion were obviously awakened by the movement of the fight and came out of seclusion. Wen Lanfeng did not say a word and directly flew past them to the lakeside to carry Wen Rui back. The Wen family disciples who were so shocked that they forgot to salute took a long time to react. They looked at each other in disbelief. They actually saw the elder ancestor injured. It was really hard to believe that someone could injure the elder ancestor. Chapter 763. In the boundless mountains, a shadow suddenly fell from the sky. Yan Zhuixing, who was fleeing in panic, quickly dodged through the dense forest. He found a hidden cave in a sorry state and directly entered it. Who knew that there were two big gray wolves, one male and one female, lying inside? The two wolves were shocked and before they could do anything, Yan Zhuixing punched them into a bloody mess without hesitation. He then turned around and hid in the cave covered by grass and trees, carefully watching the surroundings. He was still in the territory of Baiwan country, but he really did not dare to run anymore. Once when Lanfeng caught up with him, in terms of speed, he was frightened by the scene of Wen Lanfeng chasing him. In addition, the demonic aura in his body was almost exhausted. He could not run far even if he wanted to, so he had to find a hidden place to hide. After confirming that no one was chasing him, Yan Zhuixing's nervousness was somewhat relieved. He looked around the barren mountains. What a familiar scene. What a déjà vu. Yan Zhuixing sat on the ground, helplessness and desolation surging on his face. He was fleeing in panic in the barren mountains again. This was not the first or second time. Was this his fate? Yan Zhuixing inserted his hands into the soil. He did not expect Wen Lanfeng to be so strong. After being successfully attacked by Wen Rui, he did not even have a chance to get close to Wen Lanfeng. Based on his current cultivation, the demonic skill he cultivated could only exert its power in close combat. But even if he could get close to Wen Lanfeng, the demonic fist that he exerted with all his strength still could not hurt Wen Lanfeng. Instead, he was injured again. He did not expect that Bing Qingzi's cultivation was so different from Wen Lanfeng's. He could hurt Bing Qingzi with 60% of his strength, but he could not hurt Wen Lanfeng with 100% of his strength. Yan Zhuixing was speechless, regretting that he did not listen to Bing Qingzi's words and only came out after mastering the demonic skill. He did not think that Bing Qingzi did not expect that Yan Zhuixing would hurt him at all. Moreover, Yan Zhuixing was purely resisting and did not fight back at all. If Bing Qingzi really wanted to kill Yan Zhuixing would not be any better. After all, an expert at the late stage of soul transformation was not to be trifled with. No! Yan Zhuixing jumped up with a swoosh. His movement was too violent and affected his internal injuries. He immediately bent over and pressed his chest, choking a mouthful of blood. After he slowly straightened his body, his face was filled with anger and unwillingness. As he gritted his teeth, he was actually so angry that he was trembling. Now that he had calmed down, he recalled the punch that collided with Wen Lanfeng. When he was escaping, he looked back and saw that Wen Lanfeng's chest was bleeding. In other words, his punch was effective. Thinking about why Wen Lanfeng didn't chase after him. Wen Lanfeng had proven that he had the ability to kill him, so why did he stop there and watch him escape? It was obvious that Wen Lanfeng had lost the ability to chase after him. Once he figured it out, Yan Zhuixing immediately felt like his heart was being stabbed by a knife. He understood that he had missed the most crucial opportunity. Return now. This was impossible. With Wen Lanfeng's ability, with this period of time as a buffer, not to mention recovering from his injuries, he would at least have the ability to fight again. After fighting with him, Wen Lanfeng must have understood the power of his devil fist. If he went back to fight, it would be impossible for Wen Lanfeng to fight him in close combat. A flying sword with unparalleled power could take his life. Cough, cough. Yan Zhuixing coughed violently and spat out mouthfuls of blood. This was due to his anger, which aggravated his injuries. He covered his chest and looked at the blood on the ground. His gaze slowly recovered its indifference. Under the dazzling red, he gradually calmed down. His indifferent eyes stared outside the cave. Since his demonic fist had injured Wen Lanfeng, it meant that he still had a chance for revenge. Wen Lanfeng, you have so many weaknesses. It won't be too long before we meet again. Yan Zhuixing gritted his teeth and sat down cross-legged. He took out a panacea and began to adjust his breath to restore his body. This was the most important thing at the moment. In the sacred hall of the Wen family, Wen Lanfeng's personal meditation place was empty and quiet. In the corner, Wen Rui, who was chained up, lay there quietly. Although he was unconscious, Wen Lanfeng had personally sealed his dantian, making it impossible for him to use his cultivation. His serious injuries had also been healed by Wen Lanfeng with his profound cultivation. There was a chance for him to recover slowly. Wen Lanfeng was sitting cross-legged opposite him, healing himself. A few days later, Wen Lanfeng slowly opened his eyes. Although his injuries had not healed, they were no longer a problem. He calmly looked at Wen Rui in the corner, without the slightest anger in his eyes. It was not Wen Rui's intention to sneak attack him. He was controlled by Yan Zhuixing. After understanding this, he could only think about how to help Wen Rui completely get rid of Yan Zhuixing's control. He got up and walked to the unconscious Wen Rui. Wen Lanfeng looked at the person on the ground and could not help but sigh. Yanqing, we were all wrong. Yu Qianqiu was right. He remembered the scene in the cornucopia. At that time, Yu Qianqiu was determined to kill Yan Zhuixing and Hu Changshuo's son, Hu Yuntian. It was he who listened to Lu Yanqing and stopped him. Otherwise, with that guy's courage to do anything, it was very likely that he would have killed Yan Zhuixing. There would not have been the disaster of Lingfang Valley and the disaster of Heart Cleansing Lake. However, it was too late to say anything now. Maybe he had caused big trouble for Yu Qianqiu. Yan Zhuixing would definitely not let him go. Wen Lanfeng shook his head slightly and felt a little regretful. He helped Wen Rui up on the spot to see if he could help him get rid of Yan Zhuixing's control, on both sides of the road leading to Lingfang Valley, there were stone tablets singing praises of Lingfang Valley for saving the world and saving people. The word pious was written on the faces of the people who came and went. That was the respect for Lingfang Valley from the bottom of their hearts. However, there was one person who did not seem to fit in with the crowd. Nobody noticed when he appeared among the passers-by. This person was wearing a black robe and walking slowly. His long black hair was draped over his shoulders. Half of his face was covered by his long hair while the other half of his face looked unusually cold. The gaze that he revealed was as calm as stagnant water. Whether it was his temperament or attire, he was different from ordinary people. The passers-by who came and went could not help but look at him. However, they would subconsciously stay away from him. Because they were too close to each other, they felt a bone-chilling coldness, as if they weren't approaching a human, but a block of ice in the winter. After entering Lingfang Valley, one could immediately smell the medicinal fragrance. The surrounding scenery was quiet and the vegetation was lush and green. There were many unknown small flowers in the medicine fields on both sides of the valley. When the breeze blew, they would sway shyly, appearing small and delicate. The long-haired man in black raised his head and looked at the two big words medicine hut, on the opposite mountain. Then, he followed the passers-by into the long row of spirit hut where patients were treated. The spirit hut was crude but it did not lose its elegance. Even though the four sides were hollow and ventilated, the medicinal fragrance was far richer than the outside. After the long-haired man in black looked around coldly, he silently sat on the bench with the others and waited in line. Chapter 764. However, no one was willing to sit close to him. His left and right sides became empty, which was not harmonious with the surrounding atmosphere. All of a sudden, he became extremely conspicuous in the abode. It was hard not to be noticed by the disciples of Lingfang Valley. The disciples of Lingfang Valley who were busy in the abode all looked at him. Someone walked to his side and looked at him suspiciously. "Are you here to see a doctor?" Yan Zhuixing did not even look at him. He shook his head slightly and said, "I'm here to deliver a message." Message? That person was taken aback and asked in astonishment, "What message?" "Third brother Axian asked me to deliver the message," Yan Zhuixing said lightly. The ordinary people at the side naturally didn't know what he was talking about, but how could the disciples of Spirit Fang Valley not know who third brother Axian was? When they heard what he said, they quickly walked over and stared at him, but no one could see through his cultivation. The person immediately asked, "What message did third brother Axian ask you to deliver? Are you ninth brother Axian?" Yan Zhuixing looked at him and said lightly, "Third brother Axian told me that I can only tell ninth brother Axian." Lingfang Valley was almost turned upside down because of third brother Axian and his brothers. The person naturally knew that it was not a trivial matter. He looked around the ordinary people who were staring at them curiously and frowned. He immediately smiled and cupped his hands at Yan Zhuixing. "It must be hard for you to come all the way here to deliver the message. Please follow me to the back of the mountain. I have some good tea to quench your thirst." Yan Zhuixing said lightly, "It's okay. I'm not thirsty. It's good here. I'll wait for ninth brother Axian here." The disciple of Lingfang Valley hesitated for a while and then whispered to the person beside him, "Quickly go and ask ninth uncle master to come." The person beside him immediately ran out of the abode. The person then asked with a smile, "I haven't asked for your name yet. I wonder if you can tell me." However, Yan Zhuixing did not speak anymore. He sat there stiffly and looked straight, as if he did not hear anything. The person was a little embarrassed but he could not say anything. He could only wait for ninth brother Axian. Of course, he was also guarding. Since this person knew about third brother Axian, he could not let him go. Not long after, a tall and thin man in grey quickly ran into the abode. It was ninth brother Axian. The crowd parted to let him in. The disciple who answered before immediately pointed, "Ninth uncle master, that's him." Old ninth Aksayan sized him up and his pupils shrank. He discovered that this person was actually at the early stage of soul formation. However, in the cultivation world, anyone who could reach the soul formation stage was not a nobody, but he had never seen this person before. Yan Zhuixing tilted his head and looked at him. He slowly stood up and said indifferently, "You're ninth Aksayan." Because the two of them had never met before, they didn't know each other. Aksayan Laojiu cupped his hands and said, "I am indeed Aksayan Laojiu. I heard that you are here on behalf of my third brother. Is this true?" "Of course. Otherwise, I wouldn't have come all the way here," Yan Zhuixing said calmly. Ninth brother Aksayan got the confirmation and became anxious. However, when he saw the ordinary people around, he immediately waved his hand and said, "Please move to the back of the mountain. We can talk slowly." "No need. If you have anything to say, say it here." Yan Zhuixing refused. Ninth brother Aksayan was stunned. He looked at the crowd again and forced a smile, "Then I will follow you." "Oh right, I haven't asked for your name." Yan Zhuixing stared at him and slowly said word by word, "Yan Zhuixing." When he said that, all the disciples of Lingfang Valley were shocked as if they were facing a great enemy. Ninth brother Aksayan clenched his fists so tightly that there was an explosive sound. However, he was immediately stunned as if he had noticed something wrong. He sized up Yan Zhuixing again and said in a deep voice, "Who exactly are you? Why did you come to my Lingfang Valley to seek pleasure?" As far as he knew, Yan Zhuixing was only in the early stage of tribulation passing. Moreover, one of his arms was chopped off by Yu Qianqiu. The characteristics of this person couldn't match with Yan Zhuixing at all. How could it be Yan Zhuixing? Therefore, he concluded that this person came to Lingfang Valley to make trouble. "What do you think I can gain by coming to Lingfang Valley to pretend to be Yan Zhuixing?" Yan Zhuixing snorted. His eyes suddenly glowed with a demonic red light and locked onto ninth brother Aksayan's eyes. Ninth brother Aksayan's expression instantly became dull. The surrounding people only felt that the red light was dazzling. When the red light disappeared, they looked at Yan Zhuixing in horror as if they had seen a monster. They all retreated and knocked over many things. The disciples of Lingfang Valley also stared at Yan Zhuixing inexplicably. They didn't know what was going on with the red light that burst out from his eyes. Yan Zhuixing suddenly raised his finger and pointed at the disciple of Lingfang Valley who was talking to him before and said, "Kill him." Ninth brother Aksayan's dull expression instantly came back to life. Without hesitation, he struck the disciple beside him with his palm. That disciple never thought that ninth brother Aksayan would sneak attack him. He didn't even have the thought of dodging. Immediately, he let out a shrill scream and died on the spot. Yan Zhuixing nodded his head in satisfaction. However, the surrounding people were terrified. Murder. Suddenly, screams could be heard from all directions. They rushed out of the abode and scrambled out of the valley. No one stopped the four brothers from entering. Once the four brothers entered the abode, they couldn't avoid the dead bodies on the ground. Eldest brother Aksayan stared at the ground and frowned. "Ninth brother, what's going on?" Just as he looked up, he saw the eyes of the man in black next to ninth brother Aksayan explode with red light, messing up his consciousness. His expression instantly became sluggish. The other three immediately felt something was wrong. Especially second brother Aksayan, his reaction was quite fast. He immediately shouted, "Where did this demon come from?" He directly threw a palm at Yan Zhuixing, deciding to stop him first. Who would have thought that in a blur, ninth brother Aksayan had already teleported in front of him? Second brother Aksayan was stunned and was forced to stop. But what he never expected was that Aksayan Laojiu's lightning-fast punch had already landed on his chest. In a situation where he had no defense at all, he was mercilessly punched by a soul formation stage master. The situation could be imagined. Before second brother Axion could finish his words, he was sent flying by the punch. With a bang, he crashed into the abode. Blood spurted out from his mouth, spraying into the air like a blood pillar. With a bang, he fell outside, completely motionless. He didn't even have the chance to scream. Fourth brother and eighth brother Axion simply couldn't believe that all of this was real. The two of them were completely dumbfounded and their minds were blank. Yan Zhuixing, who subdued eldest brother Axion, also didn't expect such a good thing to happen. He calmly subdued the dazed fourth brother and eighth brother one by one. After the Spirit Fang Valley disciples outside the abode witnessed all of this, they were all dumbfounded. They didn't know what was going on. Normally, they were like blood brothers. Why did they start killing each other? Some of the disciples who reacted quickly recalled that Yan Zhuixing had previously said that his name was Yan Zhuixing. Coupled with his demonic red eyes, they immediately shouted, "He is Yan Zhuixing. That is the demon eye." Martial uncles and martial uncles are being controlled by the demon eye. When Lu Yanqing saw second brother Axion flying out of the abode, she was also a little dumbfounded. When she heard someone shouting, "Yan Zhuixing and the demon eye," she was immediately shocked and directly teleported down. The Allure Beauty and Yan Yu looked at each other in horror, then quickly followed after them. Yan Zhuixing was slowly walking out of the abode. Behind him were the eldest brother, fourth brother, eighth brother and ninth brother of the Axion clan. When Lu Yanqing landed, Yan Zhuixing immediately stopped and sneered. Then, two women landed behind Lu Yanqing, causing him to squint his eyes. He nodded slightly and said, "100 charms Beauty and Master Yan, I didn't expect you to still be here. It really surprised me." Good, this is really good. Everyone is here. Saves me the trouble of searching everywhere. Chapter 765. He was really happy. He thought that Yu Qianqiu would definitely take the two women away when he came here last time. He didn't expect them to still be here. If he had known this, he would have come to Spirit Fang Valley first instead of going to the one family to suffer. But then again, if he wasn't full of self-confidence and wanted to control Wen Lanfeng to help him deal with Miao Yud, so that he could deal with Yu Qianqiu, he wouldn't have provoked Wen Lanfeng for the time being. Lu Yanqing was even more so. To put it bluntly, Lu Yanqing was just a vase to him, no matter how beautiful she was. But controlling Wen Lanfeng would be of great use. Not to mention the shame of Spirit Fang Valley. It was estimated that Wen Lanfeng was the only one in the cultivation world who could barely be Miao Yud's opponent. Moreover, he could get the whereabouts of Yu Qianqiu from Wen Lanfeng. At the same time, he could use Wen Lanfeng to intimidate those in the cultivation world who had bad intentions towards him. In short, as long as he controlled Wen Lanfeng, many troubles could be easily solved. But reality was cruel. Wen Lanfeng wasn't so easy to deal with. If Wen Rui hadn't succeeded in the sneak attack and injured Wen Lanfeng, he might have had to use blood escape to escape. Since Wen Lanfeng couldn't control him, he could only destroy him to avoid endless troubles. Moreover, after the incident with the Wen family, Wen Lanfeng definitely wouldn't let him go. Because of this, Lu Yanqing played a role in his eyes. This was also the purpose of his coming to Spirit Fang Valley. However, what he never thought was that Temptress and Yan Yu were still here. One had an ambiguous relationship with Yu Qianqiu, and the other was Miao Yud's woman. The harvest this time was simply too great. How could Yan Zhuixing not be happy when the two women who had a close relationship with his two enemies were here? Temptress and Yan Yu looked at each other speechlessly. The three women, including Lu Yanqing, were shocked. They had all seen Yan Zhuixing, and the person in front of them was indeed Yan Zhuixing. However, what the three of them couldn't understand was that didn't Yu Qianqiu say that Yan Juixing's arm had been chopped off by him? Why was it still fine? Out of the three girls, Lu Yanqing was the most shocked. She could tell that Yan Juixing's cultivation had already reached the spirit-severing stage. When the disciples of Spirit Fang Valley saw their grandmaster, they immediately became courageous. A few disciples hurriedly carried second brother Xian's body over and cried, "Grandmaster, Master is already dead." Lu Yanqing was not a person who was easily angered. Seeing her disciple die tragically, she immediately flew into a rage. Her beautiful face was frosty as she stared at Yan Juixing and shouted, "Yan Juixing, did you kill him?" Yan Juixing smiled but did not answer. Instead, it was the Lingfang Valley disciple who stammered, "Grandmaster, my master was killed by ninth martial uncle." Lu Yanqing was shocked when she heard this. She glared at old ninth Xian and said, "Old ninth, is what he said true?" Xian Laojiu stood obediently behind Yan Juixing without saying a word. After Yan Juixing looked at Lu Yanqing from head to toe, he said in a breathtaking tone, "You are indeed the world's most beautiful woman. You are indeed unparalleled in the world. No wonder Wen Lanfeng can't forget you. Although I have seen Senior at the cornucopia, it is a pity that I did not see your true appearance. Seeing you today, this trip was not in vain. This junior finally knows what a beauty is." Not mentioning cornucopia would have been fine, but the moment cornucopia was mentioned, Lu Yanqing regretted it so much that her intestines were about to break. If she had not stopped Yu Qianqiu from making a move, how could Spirit Fang Valley have suffered such a disaster today? For a moment, Yu Qianqiu's warning at the cornucopia kept lingering in her mind. Unfortunately, Yu Qianqiu was right. She regretted not being able to do it in the first place. Where is third brother Xian? Was he also killed by you? Lu Yanqing's white face flashed with unease as she asked. Yan Juixing pointed to old ninth Xian and the others behind him and said indifferently, "Just like them, alive and well." Lu Yanqing's eyes swept over several disciples and said word by word, "Come back." However, after calling out a few times, no one listened to her. She immediately gritted her teeth and a pair of small golden knives appeared in her hands. It seemed that she, who had always hated fighting and killing, was also about to make a move. Yan Juixing's face revealed a sarcastic look and said indifferently, "Senior Lu, I advise you not to be impulsive. Otherwise, you will not be able to bear the consequences." As he said, he slightly tilted his head and said, "Boss Xian, your master's emotions are very unstable. You should die in front of your master and let her calm down." "Yes." Boss Xian bowed slightly and directly hit the top of his head with his palm. In an instant, red and white things burst out and he fell to the ground on the spot. He twitched twice and stopped moving. "No!" Lu Yanqing exclaimed. The Spirit Fang Valley disciples behind were shocked and looked at the scene in front of them in disbelief. The temptress and Yan Yu's faces also changed greatly. Only Yan Juixing and the others were indifferent. Especially old ninth Xian and the others, they simply did not care about the life and death of their own brothers. Yan Juixing said indifferently, "Senior Lu, I was right. If you dare to make me unhappy again, I only need to say a word and all your disciples will die in front of you. If you don't believe me, you can try again." Lu Yanqing heard this and immediately felt a sense of powerlessness. Looking at the dead boss Xian, she was a little confused. "Senior Lu." Yan Juixing suddenly called out softly. Lu Yanqing slowly raised her head. Just as she made eye contact with him, she immediately saw a demonic red light bursting out from his eyes. In the blink of an eye, she was in the middle of a vast sea of blood. Numerous blood vines quickly entangled her and tied her up. Lu Yanqing was shocked and immediately remembered that the other party was using the demonic eye. She immediately struggled and used all her strength to break the blood vines that tied her up. At the moment when the blood vines broke, her eyes regained clarity and the scene of Spirit Fang Valley reappeared. Yan Zhuixing slightly staggered and his face was a little pale. He finally believed that the demonic eye could only be controlled by those below the soul formation stage. Once one reached the soul formation stage, he could only control opponents of the same level. With Lu Yanqing's cultivation, he had no way to control her. Amidst the exclamations of the Spirit Fang Valley disciples, the Temptress and Yan Yu supported Lu Yanqing at the same time and said anxiously in unison, "Senior, are you all right?" Lu Yanqing shook her head slightly and gritted her teeth with a pretty face. "Yan Zhuixing, how dare you use the demonic eye on me?" Yan Zhuixing slightly calmed down and said indifferently, "Why can't I? It's a pity that Senior Lu's cultivation is profound and this junior can't control it for the time being. What a pity. You." Lu Yanqing glanced at the disciples that were controlled by Yan Zhuixing and swallowed the harsh words that were about to come out of her mouth. She gritted her teeth and said, "What do you want for you to let them go?" "Humph humph." Yan Zhuixing sneered and looked back and forth between the girls. "Who can tell me where Yu Qianqiu is?" The three girls were startled. The Temptress really didn't know where Yu Qianqiu was because she didn't know that Yu Qianqiu was Niu Yud. However, the other two girls knew in their hearts, but they wouldn't say it no matter what. Yan Yu could be said to be dead set on Yu Qianqiu. How could she harm Yu Qianqiu? And Lu Yanqing wasn't the kind of person who would sacrifice others to save her disciple. In the silence, Yan Zhuixing indifferently said, "Since you're not saying anything, it means that someone knows but doesn't want to tell me. Senior Lu, could it be that you want your disciple to die on the spot?" Lu Yanqing's face instantly turned pale. She bit her lips and said, "I don't even know where Yu Qianqiu is. Even if you kill them all, I still won't know." Yan Zhuixing was startled. How could he kill all her disciples? They were the bargaining chips to blackmail her. If he killed them all, she would immediately fight him with her life. He immediately nodded and said, "It seems that Senior Lu really doesn't know." As he spoke, the demonic red light in his eyes suddenly appeared again and directly locked onto the Temptress's eyes. The Temptress's expression instantly became stupid and she foolishly walked towards him. "No." Yan Yu immediately grabbed the Temptress and refused to let her go. Yan Zhuixing snorted coldly. "In for a penny, in for a pound." He seized the opportunity and his eyes turned red again. In an instant, he also controlled the careless Yan Yu in his hands. In the end, the two girls walked towards him together. Lu Yanqing quickly grabbed the two of them. Yan Zhuixing angrily shouted, "If you don't want old Ninth Axayan to die, let go." Lu Yanqing's body trembled. She subconsciously let go and watched the two girls walk towards Yan Zhuixing. Yan Zhuixing snorted coldly and stared at the two girls who were walking over. He asked, "Which one of you knows where Yu Qianqiu is?" The two girls' dumbfounded expressions came back to life. The Temptress shook her head to indicate that she didn't know. Yan Yu paused and then reported, "Yu Qianqiu is actually Niu Yud. Niu Yud and Yu Qianqiu are the same person. He should be in the demon domain." "What?" Yan Zhuixing exclaimed. He thought that he had heard wrongly. He hurriedly asked again, "Are you sure that Niu Yud is Yu Qianqiu?" Yan Yu said respectfully, "There's no mistake. I'm sure. Because I realized that Niu Yud has been wearing a human skin mask." Yan Zhuixing still didn't believe it. He said, "Then why is there such a huge difference in their cultivation?" "I can't figure it out either," Yan Yu replied. Yan Zhuixing was worried that she was fooling him. He checked again to make sure that Yan Yu was indeed under his control and wasn't lying. He was immediately dumbfounded. If Yan Yu hadn't told him, he would never have thought that Niu Yud was Yu Qianqiu. This also explained why Niu Yud purposely spread the news to make him be hunted even though he had no enmity with him. It turned out that it was all Yu Qianqiu's doing. Such a shameless way of doing things was indeed Yu Qianqiu's style. However, he couldn't figure out why his cultivation could shake the cultivation world when he was Niu Yud, but his cultivation was only at the tribulation stage when he was Yu Qianqiu. There was definitely a secret that he didn't know. Maybe Yu Qianqiu was playing tricks on him. Otherwise, with Niu Yud's ability, there was no reason for him to show mercy when fighting with him. At the thought of this, anger burned in his chest. He had been fooled by that guy for such a long time. It was intolerable. He suddenly turned around and said, "Senior Liu, I'm afraid I need your help with something. Please ask Senior Wenlonfeng to come over." You're tuning into the Journey of the Soul YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.